This is Rafiq Luzon, and you are tuned in to Nothing But That Sports Talk. This is Rafiq Luzon here with Nothing But That Sports Talk. It's NBA Finals time, and your eyes do not deceive you. I cannot think of a better person to talk some basketball with as somebody who's been literally all over basketball culture as a journalist for a while. Robert Scoop Jackson. You might have seen him on ESPN. You might have read his articles on Slam Magazine. This Scoop actually knows Brandon Scoopy Robinson, by the way. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you having me. Let's get that orange and blue sky thing going on. You know, let's see where it carries us.
Yeah, we'll definitely see where it carries us. And you know what? Before we get to that, why don't you tell me how your life as a writer got started?
Oh, wow. I started kind of professionally. I started as a writer as soon as I kind of got out of graduate school at Howard University. I was doing some writing while I was in grad school. I was writing my master thesis at the time, but I started writing commentary for Howard University's newspaper, The Hilltop, and some of those articles were being picked up by larger news outlets. I think the USA Today ran one, Christian Science Monitor ran one, somebody else ran one. So some of the stuff I was writing for them was getting picked up. And that kind of started the professional field of me leaning more into writing than I was leaning into production, because I did my graduate assistantship and did production work at BET while I was at Howard University. But once some of my writing started to get picked up, and I started to get these little small checks in the mail for rerunning some of the stuff I'd written, you know, you got to make a choice, man. It's like, all right, I'm doing all this production work. This is assistant production work, not getting a penny, even though it's going towards education. But I'm starting to get a little bit of change for this writing thing. So, you know, it was an easy decision for me to start really leaning into my writing at that point, and then understanding the freelance game of like, okay, I can just write. I don't necessarily have to get a job or have to necessarily be employed by some of these organizations that are running my stories, but I can just submit work, and not just applications. I can submit work, or I can pitch work, or I can see if I can write one-offs for these outlets. And that's what I started doing. I started getting into the freelance game. I call it journalistic prostitution. I've always called it that. Because I was, man, look, anybody had a check, let's go. So I was just out there selling it, right? And then I started getting asked to write for certain outlets on a regular basis. And that's when it really started to kick in. And I was able to start supplementing the income I was making working. I was teaching in Chicago at city colleges. I was teaching classes during the day, and I was able to supplement that income when the writing requests started to come in, and there started to be some stability in writing for certain outlets on a regular basis. So once I was able to do that, that's when I started like, all right, this writing thing is going to be like full time. And while I was doing that, I started my own magazine at the same time. So that's when it all started to become full circle. And like about 2 years into that, Slam Magazine called, and there you go.
Wow, that's really amazing. As I welcome in 1-2 combo on the dial, how you doing today? As Scoop Jackson just shared his background of how the journalism career got started since his days writing for the Hilltop at Howard University. Yeah. And now he has his own platform that lets him write for Slam Magazine. And I don't know how often you read Slam Magazine, combo, but it's a pretty interesting magazine to read, especially since we're in NBA Finals fever.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Scoop, I know Scoop's work, man. Ralph, you don't have to tell me about Scoop's work. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've obviously read Slam over the years, and appreciate all the work that you do, sir. And thanks for having me on the show, Ralph.
Okay, thank you long, but now to continue the conversation, like when you started Slam Magazine, what was like the first story that you ever done as actually being employed, both starting your own platform, and how proud of you are for doing it?
Well, here's the deal, man. I came out of, once again, one of the things I learned about doing the freelance game and, writing for other individuals, especially when you're not necessarily contracted or you're not um, employed by them, which is another word I use, is that you there's a sense of powerlessness there. And I've always been one who has functioned from a standpoint of do for yourself or die a slave. So there's always been, I don't want to call it necessarily an entrepreneurial spirit inside of me, but I've always functioned in life for you to operate from a position of strength. And when you have your own, that's your position of strength. So one of the things I did as I started freelancing was because I was, like I said, I was in production first. So dealing with BET, I learned about production. So when I graduated from Howard, I incorporated my own production company thinking I was going to do production work. Maybe freelance or maybe because I was still working for BET once I graduated. So I just started my own small production company and incorporated. But it wound up being a brilliant thing because while I was freelancing and while I was trying to gain acceptance in the journalistic space with other outlets, when I did start making deals with long-term deals, not just one-off deals, long-term deals with outlets, I was able to do that as a company, not as an individual, which I learned early is that, and I learned early because I was writing stories as a freelancer and not getting my checks. I was writing stories as a freelancer, and when the stories would come out, they didn't look like the stories I turned in. Like editors had like chopped them up and turned it around, and the souls of the stories I was writing were just gutted. And that's why I started my own magazine. I'm like, why am I doing this and barely getting paid? Because I have to chase them. I'm chasing them for my check. Sometimes it'd be 8-9 months before you get a $350 check, or if you get paid at all and you just don't write for that magazine again. So why am I doing this for everybody else when I literally could be doing this for myself because I do have a day job? That's what the teaching job was. So basically, once again, do for yourself or die a slave. So I said, instead of prostituting my services for everybody else, I'm gonna pimp me. That's what forced me to start my own magazine. And once I started my own magazine, I had a foundation of strength that I didn't have before. And it gave me the power with a master's degree to say no. And that's one of the most beautiful things in the world when you have in this industry, almost in any industry, but I can speak specifically from this media industry, is you have the power to say no. Because one, you have your own. Two, you're not dependent on anybody. And three, that's where the master's degree helps. That it gives you the power to say no, something else. You have to believe that something else is going to come along because you've done your part on that side educationally. So having that company with me allowed me to beautifully do things that a lot of other people in the game weren't able to do. So when the publisher of Slam Magazine tracked me down after their second issue, I was able to function and have conversation with them with a position of strength. You get what I'm saying? It was like, all right, I'm not working for you. I'm not an employee of you. We're signing a deal for me to come on as a writer for you, but you're signing a deal with my company. You get what I'm saying? So now you're making a deal with Strong Island Media, which was the name of my company. You're making a deal with them. And to be honest, a lot of this came from me watching Spike Lee and doing what he did with 40 Acres and a Mule film work. He became like a carrot, a North Star to like, okay, I see how Spike is functioning. I can actually do the exact same thing. Let me follow that motto. Whereas 40 Acres and a Mule were doing small projects, whether it be small documentaries, doing commercials, but everything was a partnership. But every partnership, whether it be film, working on the Jordan commercials with Wyden and Kennedy, all of them had that 40 Acre Mule stamp on there. So he was doing partnership works. He wasn't working for Wyden and Kennedy. He wasn't working for the studios that were putting out Do the Right Thing or, whatever, Mo Better Blues. It was a partnership. But inside of that partnership, even though he was providing them the work, it was 40 acres and a mule film work. Mm. And I took that concept and just applied it to what I was doing in the field of journalism. And that gave me a position of strength because, and this is the main thing I learned from that, is that when you are dealing with larger companies and doing partnerships, even if you're a small independent business, small independent businesses have lawyers. So the chasing of the checks stopped. The not getting paid on time stopped, because the way our agreement worked out is that you did not sign a contract with an individual. The individual is providing the services, but the contract you sign is with a company. And the one thing one company does not want, I don't care how small it is, they don't want to talk to lawyers. And as long as there's a threat there, now keep in mind, I did have a lawyer on retainer, I always had that. But they don't want those conversations, because a small $500 agreement could turn into $5,000 on their end real quick, because you're not paying my client. So that's how I was able to start functioning as a journalist in the field on a regular basis. And that's how the Slam thing, that was one of the deals that I was able to deal with Slam, is that my agreement with them was with my own company. And from there, I provided services for them. Now, the beauty of this story, to what you asked about the first thing I did for Slam, it's Tony Gervino, who became editor-in-chief. Tony Gervino and I came into Slam on the same issue number 3. Mm. We came in I came right behind Tony because the publisher, Dennis Page, tracked me down. Tony had just started. I knew Dennis was familiar with my work because he was reading my magazine and reading all the freelance working I was doing. So he saw my byline. I don't know how familiar Tony was with my work. But when Tony and I got together, the first assignment he gave me since I was in Chicago was to get a story on Dream Team 2. No, to get a story on the Nike All-American basketball camp. Because the Nike All-American high school basketball camp always took place in Chicago, right outside of Chicago. And that was easy for me because Tony didn't know that my play uncle ran the camp. His name was Forrest Harris. He used to run the Nike camp. And that was the first assignment he gave me. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm in. So at that camp, I think it was 1994, Vince Carter, Kevin Garnett, Shea Cotton, Paul Pierce, like they were all there, all in high school. And I wrote about it, but here's the other thing, that the full answer to your question. My first assignment for Slam was a 350-word assignment on the Nike All-American basketball camp. Once again, I said earlier, Dennis Page, the publisher, was familiar with my writing. But I had never written about sports before. But Tony Gervino, I'm not sure was. So I filed Tony the story that he asked for. I filed him a 350-word story on the Nike All-American basketball camp. But what I also did was I filed him just for kicks and giggles, but very serious. I gave him a 1,200-word story because I wanted to prove to him I could write. Because I didn't think 350 words gave the full scope of what I was able to give him as a writer. But I was following what the rules were on the assignment that were given. So I filed him a 350-word story, but I gave him this extra 1,200-word story on what a full story on this camp looked like. Because once again, come with a position of strength, but also, do for yourself or die a slave, but also sometimes you have to lose $1 million to make $2 million. So I'm getting paid for this 350-word story, but I'm going to give you this 1,200 one for free. That 1,200-word story, after he read that, he called me back and said, hey, can you do the cover story for me now? Right. The Dream Team is going to be in Chicago in 2 weeks. Can you get Shaquille O'Neal? of course, you get where this is going. That's how it worked. So that's how I got in and built a relationship with Slam. From that simple trusting yourself, betting on yourself, spending $1 million to make $2 million type of thing. And it took us a while to track down Shaq. I'm not gonna tell you that long ass story, but we wound up getting it in, and that became my first cover story for Slam. That was my first issue for Slam, Tony Gervino's first issue to Slam. So that was kind of our introduction of ourselves to the journalism world as kind of like a tandem that started what eventually became the building of Slam Magazine.
And you talk about the Building Slam magazine. I love what you said right there. Do for yourself with Josh Slavin, because that's kind of what I've been doing ever since I got out of college. Because long story short, I'm a graduate from LIU Brooklyn and Fordham University, and currently I work on getting a doctorate degree at St. John's University. And I've been kind of doing a lot of independent, starting my own podcast, nothing but that sports. I got into with a lot of basketball media professionals and athletes, like in Combo been on the show a couple of times, and you know this. I mean, I kind of linked to them for over a year, and we've both been having our own show, doing independent interviews one way or another. So, and obviously overseeing the growth of Slam Magazine, especially with the women's game.
Yeah,
you played a huge part of that. All it took was that one particular story, among later stories you had throughout your career, made a huge impact on the culture of Slam Magazine, which leads us one question. What do you love about the impact of Slam Magazine for basketball and culture put together?
What you just said is what I love the most, is that it's a contribution to basketball culture, not just the game of basketball. And I think we were very intentional and specific about that. We wanted to speak to the entire culture, the entire ecosystem that is the game of basketball, which is much bigger than the NBA, much bigger than NCAA, much bigger than AAU. You know, it's inclusive to how we as human beings that are connected to the game of basketball function, how we flow, how we communicate, how we live our lives, how we engage, how we give to the sport, even though we're not necessarily playing in the sport. All of those, to me, are part of the connective tissue of what makes basketball so great, but they're all a part of what creates a culture inside the sport that we all know exists. Nobody seemed to be tapping into that. Streets of Smith wasn't tapping into that. Sports Illustrated wasn't tapping into that. The Sporting News wasn't tapping into that. USA Today wasn't tapping into that. No disrespect, but Fleer and whatever, the trading card, all the people that were telling basketball stories, they weren't tapping into the entire culture. That is what the purpose was that we tried to serve. So that's what I'm really most proud of, because I think we really did a solid and respectful job of bringing, as best as anybody could, the entire culture of basketball to print on a regular basis, by the stories we did, by the images we used, by the angles we took, by the language we spoke, by the genderless way we looked at basketball, where we never treated women's basketball like women's basketball. We just treated it as basketball. By looking at playground legends the same way we looked at legends that are in the Hall of Fame. You know, we would do a story on, to us, you know, Fly Williams or Ray Lewis or Billy Harris or Earl Manigault, Joe Hammond. All of those guys are just as important to us as the Jerry West, as a Julius Erving, as a Roger Brown, as a, Hakeem Olajuwon and Patrick Ewing. They're all part of basketball culture, and they all play a large role in our job at Slam. And what we did is we treated them all the same. And I don't know if anybody actually did that back in the day. I don't know if anybody does that today. And that's one of the things I think, if not, that's the most singular thing I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish in Slam Magazine. I will hold that down. And it took a long time for the general public, we had a niche audience for a long time. It was only, we had that if you know type of audience for a long time. Because we spoke to people who felt that they were unheard for a long time. And once the larger, the largest sector started to hear and recognize and to some degree respect what we were doing, it made things a lot easier for us. But we enjoyed the struggle. We enjoyed not being quote unquote commercial. We enjoyed having to be the anti-establishment when it came to print media and sports. All that was great for us because that told us that we were doing the right thing and doing something in a way that no one else is doing. And if that's your intent and you're executing it, if you don't find pride in that, then to me, something's wrong. And all of us there took a lot of pride in that, and us never leaving that and never being able to be swayed off of that. Because as you get popular, as entities come in and start accepting you, where advertising dollars start getting larger, and these larger, more commercial companies start coming in and buying ad space and buying up pages, they want you to shift your dynamic and get you off of your square and like adjust your intent and purpose. We never allowed that to happen, while we were there.
Because that's their vision, not yours, So
Exactly, but money flips people. Money, and especially in a capitalistic society, there is the belief that money is the thing that what is Tony saying? It may not come in first, but it sure beats the hell out of what comes in second. So when you function from there, when these companies start coming in and you stop doing local advertisements and you start doing national advertisements, when you stop doing advertisements for the bodega in Harlem, and you start, selling pages to Quaker Oats for Pepsi, and Frito-Lay and all that stuff, that changes everything. So, okay, well, you can't really tell this story that way. We would like for you to not tell the story that way, or we don't want you to use that image, or we want you to take out this section of the magazine. Like we had a section of the magazine always ran at the bottom of the front pages called Noise. And Noise was like legendary for the shit that it would talk. If you got a deal with Adidas or you have a deal with whatever, a major company, whatever that company could be, and they're like, oh, we'd like you to tone down the language of Noise because that doesn't fit with our brand. And we're buying the back page ad of your magazine. If that money over a year relationship with that company, if you're the publisher and you're the writers, if you're the editors, writers, photographers, if that's able to give you a greater financial bed to lay in, like Scoop, no longer are you getting paid whatever to write a story. Now, Scoop, we were paying you $700 a story. Now, because we have whatever, vitamin water as the sponsor of the back, we secured that for the back page of the magazine. Now, Scoop, you're getting $3,000 for every story. If the publisher can go from, still having a house in mid-Manhattan to now, because not only does he have vitamin water, he's got Levi's, instead of South Pole. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Not only does he just have Adidas and one, now he got Adidas and one, Nike, Uggs. You get what I'm saying? He's got, it's getting bigger now, which is never going to happen. Once you start getting watch ads in your magazine, that's when you're doing big business. And Slam never had watch ads, but I'm trying to make a point. Once you start getting that type of funding into your outlet and they ask you to do these small changes, very rarely do people not do it, because yes, I do have, if you're the publisher, yes, I've been living in this nice, apartment in Midtown Manhattan. But now I can get a house in the Hamptons simply by changing the language or something. Who doesn't do that? It's hard not to do that, because integrity, for the most part, unless it's intentional, is something that doesn't go away immediately. Integrity is something that gets chipped away at very slowly. And then over years, you start to notice that, damn, I'm not the same person I was anymore. You get what I'm saying? You're like, oh, how did that happen? And we watch it happen to everybody. We watch it happen to people. Sometimes people can say it's with age or it's with wisdom or greater understanding. Whatever. No, at the center of it is what you used to stand for and what you stand for now. And at the center of that is the money. And for Slam, that's not what we stood on back in the day. Now, to be honest with you, Slam is not the same magazine now it was back in the day. What comes when you start getting this corporate money, when you start making these kind of dollars, when you start partnering with these large companies, is that you become safe. And one of the things we did back in the day, we never lost sight or never even had a goal to be safe. We still wanted to be the same people, the same magazine that represented the same voice that was unheard. And I can only speak for the time that I was there, which was 11 years. All of us stood strong on that. But then again, how long, and I understand, because Slam, I think maybe is on his 4th publisher now, something like that. And when you start getting larger publishing companies getting you, you start losing less control. I said earlier, do for yourself or die a slave. Here's a greater point in how you have to wrestle with this. I think Dennis Page started Slam Magazine. I think the original price tag to start it was $1.5 million. I think I'm correct on that. Mm-hmm. He was already a publisher of Guitar World. It was under the ownership of Harris Publications, which had like 36 magazines at the time, I think. So they just launched another magazine. I think the initial cost was $1.5 million. In 4 years, they sold Slam Magazine. I think it was to Prime Media, a publishing company in London or the UK, I think. Anyway, I remember the price tag of that sale in 4 years was $25 million. What type of investment is that? I want y'all to think about that. 1.5 million to 25 million in 4 years. Okay, so at the higher level, they're like, I think Prime Media, I want to say Prime Media, I could be wrong. They have the power, since they purchased this magazine, to spend $25 million on it, to do what the fuck they want to with it. We could fight that. But they could do what they want to do with it. And once that sale is through, there's only so much fighting that we could do. Because at that point, they're like, you know what? Scoop, Tony, Russ, Don, whoever, Dennis, if y'all don't want to make the changes that we want to do as your new publishing company, all y'all can go. We can make this happen with other people. At that point, it becomes a title. We were lucky enough that the publishing company that purchased Slam was not on that. They weren't about that. They wanted the magazine to remain as, hey, keep doing what y'all doing. We just want your name on the portfolio. You all are great. You all are growing. Keep it there. So we were able to maintain our integrity and not fall into that safe space when the money started to change a little bit. But once again, it's hard to stay there for a long period of time. Slam is 30 years old now. And it would almost be foolish for them to not financially grow or test the market to see how large they can become financially even if it comes at the cost of selling pieces of their integrity or what the original foundation was from the beginning. Because you can look at it two ways. You could say, all right, Slam's not the same because the foundation has changed. Or you can say, damn, Slam's in the same space they were 30 years ago. They're not growing. That's it's a glass half full, half empty type way of looking at it. So I'm just saying that, to answer your question, when we first started off, we were able to, we had a functionality about telling the story and being true to the entire culture of basketball. I think like everything else in this country, after a period of time, you see growth, and Slam is now still one of the greatest basketball brands we have in this country, but it's splitting the purpose of culture and the business of basketball in a way that we didn't do back then. And you can look at that as part of the integrity shifting, or you could look at that as Slam has grown over the last 30 years.
Yeah, it really has. I've seen a lot of growth. I mean, it's not just something where you can okay, you write on the internet, it gets published in a magazine, boom. Right now, you got so many different writers, not just from NBA, but they also write about a lot of WBA stories, as I mentioned earlier. And we even have, and then I don't know if you come to New York, but we even have a high school game called the Slam Super Classic taking place at Rucker Park. The same Rucker Park where some of the most iconic NBA, WBA legends, or eventual legends, play at. These young kids right now are playing they're not just playing to showcase, they have an opportunity to showcase the skills for the exposure for Slam magazine.
Yes, exactly. And here's the thing. It's a great platform. It's great for Slam to do that. It works specifically with their branding. It keeps them very, very connected to the culture in a branding way, which is amazing. And those are the chances, and that's the growth that you want to see. The only thing I wish from a journalistic standpoint is I wish they would take chances that used to be taken back in the day when it comes to the stories that they are telling. The risks aren't taken there. Like, Tony used to have this thing called protest stories, where he would challenge athletes either for personal reasons or for public reasons. And he would do a story out of protest. Like, we don't even want to write about this athlete, but we have to because the athlete is relevant. But the athlete now is not going to like what we're about to write about him. An athlete could turn us down, or an athlete could, done something wrong, or not be in a good space, whatever. Whatever the reason for a protest story, that would never happen now. Not inside Slam, that will hardly happen any place now. But the risk out there to take stands and do something, to say something. Classic example, as much as I love them. And I had a conversation with them about this. Slam needs to be the magazine to write an open letter to Ja Morant. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's not to chastise him or anything, but if you have any type of love for what Ja Morant has been going through the last 3 or 4 years, if we're a magazine about the culture of basketball and Ja Morant is sitting at the center of the entire culture of the game of basketball, in this generation, very similar to the way AI did back in his run, then we have to be the magazine, or Slam should be the magazine, to give voice to him and for him at the same time. That story needs to be written. We would have written that story. Slam is not in a position to do that right now, because the one thing it doesn't want to do is lose access to Ja Morant. Because that cover story, his imaging, his relationship to the magazine is too big for them to risk that story. My thing is that it's not about the story itself, it's how the story is written. You can still write that story, but doing it in a compassionate way that is not about belittling him, not about chastising him, not about reprimanding him, not even about telling him what he needs to do with his own life. It's about you getting to the core of what's being seen and helping him see what you see from the outside publicly that could be something for him to think about, something for him to consider, something that could be helpful to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, take those chances, take those risks, because that's what the basketball magazine, I believe, still has space to stand for. But that won't happen now. Because once again, if you write something that could come off as challenging or could come off as not necessarily 90% positive toward Ja Morant, not only do you lose the possibility of losing Ja Morant, you have the possibility of losing Nike as an advertiser if they don't like it. And is one story worth that nowadays? Back in the day, hell yeah, let's roll. But once you build up the type of equity that Slam has, not just brand equity, but actual equity that becomes the functioning and operating budget for the magazine to sustain itself, where it sustained itself, is one story worth all that loss that you risk taking? I'm not naive or stupid enough to believe that, I'm not, it ain't worth it. Not now, because now you have something to lose. We functioned back in the day of Slam Magazine as if we had nothing to lose. And therein lies the difference.
I got a question, Scoop.
Yes, sir.
Who's the most influential basketball player ever?
Okay. I'm not trying to give you a bullshit answer, but it's one of those things where, I hate to say this, it's not as binary as asking the question about a GOAT who you think may be the greatest of all-time players are. When people give you the answer, it's hard to say that because there's generational answers to that. Because it's hard to compare what players did generationally. I get that. I don't agree with that, but I get that. In this case, when you're talking about influence, I think, at least for me, there's justification for using that as a criteria to answer that question. Because it's very difficult for me to look at the influence Julius Erving had across generations, across cultures, and what he was able to do internally with the game of basketball from, okay, my point is this. Julius Erving literally held an entire league together for at least 3 years, to the point that that league had enough value for the NBA to purchase 4 entire teams to incorporate it into what it was doing. For years, the ABA acted as the stepchild to the NBA. NBA wanted nothing to do with that. They were the anti-culture basketball league. One man held that league up by himself. One man. And the only reason the NBA purchased those 4 teams was to get Julius Erving into the NBA. Now, I'm not even talking about the cultural impact that Julius Erving had on everybody who was connected to the game in the 70s, from even the 80s, because it goes from like Michael Jordan to Chris Webber, to, David Thompson, Julius, to even players that were playing with him. The Julius Erving influence, it's shit. Rafiq over there looking like Dr. J with his fro. He influenced Freak right now. You know what I'm saying? So Doc's influence is hard to say anybody had a greater impact over when you take all of those things into consideration, because there's not one person who we could say single-handedly held down an entire league for that amount of time and did it culturally and corporately. And then when he came over to the NBA, basically brought an audience to the NBA that the NBA didn't have and saved the NBA and made the entire NBA cool. Even though Walt Frazier and Earl Monroe were doing their things in Knicks jersey, Julius brought a whole nother acceptability, almost like an urban acceptability to the NBA that it didn't have because it was so polished. Yeah. He brought the coolness to the NBA that it never had before. So that influence and impact, like, really was the footbed for damn near everything to come after that. Now, I'm not naive and stupid enough to say that that was more impactful or influential than what Jordan brought in. Jordan, yes, from a playing standpoint and for how he carried himself, was influenced by what Julius Erving brought over. But Michael took it to another level. And what he did and his influence was way greater than anything Julius Erving did, especially globally. Yeah. And there's intricate things that Michael did from an influential standpoint that still, to me, go unrecognized. His influence on sneaker culture is recognized. The whole athletes and everyday human beings thinking golf was cool and golf is cool all fucking started by Michael Jordan playing golf. Golf was an elitist, exclusionary sport, but when Michael started playing it, it became mainstream. Straight up, it wasn't, he got into this thing before Tiger did. Tiger took it to another level, but Michael was the one that made golf cool. I'm not even talking about the fashion aesthetics from what he did to the baggy suits back in the day to the baggy stuff he was wearing on the court.
Do you feel like the baggy thing, do you think that was the zeitgeist and Michael Jordan adapted to that, or you really feel that Michael Jordan created that?
I think he made it popular. It really started to me with the University of Illinois basketball team. I think they're fighting the line. I kind of started, and that came from the hood in Chicago.
Right.
You know, we were always into that stuff. You know, we were always trying to push things forward. And I think, you know, the hood, everything comes from the hood first, basically, when it comes to stuff like that. So, but when you have the power to be in a situation like Mike and elevate it, you know, that it's, you know, you can't ignore that. You can't not give that credit because there's so many things that happen from the origin purpose of the hood that stay there. But it takes somebody or something to bring it out of there. And Michael was the one that brought a lot of that stuff out of there. Guys wearing earrings. You know what I'm saying? Michael was the first one. There's so many things that Michael was connected to. You know, the whole rich athlete thing, even though like Walt Frazier and a lot of those cats and Julius Erving, they kind of flaunted their money. Michael did his money in another way. Michael was the one who influenced MCs and guys in hip hop of what it was like to be rich. He became their aspirational North Star. He was the one that would go in pickup games and have a Lamborghini or a Ferrari to match the fucking sneakers he was hooping in that day. That's some whole other influence shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He was the one that was flying on G4s before all these other cats were.
Right.
The whole smoking the cigar thing. That whole Michael. You know, I could go to all the small things that Michael was influential in that still resonate today. So
the bald head. The bald head.
Huh?
The bald head in the 90s. The bald head.
I was about to go with like the shaving head thing. Yeah. Michael. So
Gatorade commercial.
Be like Mike. That, you know, there's so many things.
Yeah.
That Michael is getting. So what I'm saying is that how do we gauge which one is more influential than the other? Now let's throw Iverson in there. Iverson's influence is a whole nother type of influence because his influence was much like you said. Allen Iverson didn't create anything. He just took something that was already there, the entire culture of hip hop, but he brought it to a wider audience that had never seen it in a space like that before.
Right.
he didn't do anything that none of us weren't doing on a regular basis.
And Reebok made a lot of money off it.
Oh, Reebok. Oh, yeah. Reebok made crazy money off it. But at the same time, this is where you have to give influence credit. When it was Allen's idea, because it wasn't Reebok and it wasn't Q who thought about bringing somebody like Jadakiss in to do a commercial for, that's some shit that like, all right, now we're riding. That connectivity of being true to the culture and not shying away and not being de-integritized is made Allen just more influential. Him staying true to who he was, speaking his freedom, had a cultural and societal impact that, as much as we talked about the stuff Jordan did, Allen's may have been bigger because it was connected to an already existing culture. What Allen did was not individual. Like Michael's thing could come off as individual. Like the bald head thing, that's an individual thing. You know, his jewelry, golf, smoke, that was all individual things Michael did. Allen Iverson became almost a spokesperson for a culture that already existed, that was already growing.
Right.
He almost, and I hate to use this word, but it is what it is. He commercialized hip hop without selling hip hop out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you look at how large hip hop is. Michael didn't have hip hop by his side to ride coattail with. All of Michael's influence was just a Michael influence. Allen Iverson was at the head of an entire culture that existed, and that influence really went in a global space that had shit to do with basketball. It was bigger than basketball. So, and now we can get into the Steph Curry aspect and the LeBron James aspect. You know, just
who do you think was more influential between LeBron James and Steph Curry?
I think they are. I think it's. I think from a cultural standpoint, maybe LeBron. I think from a basketball standpoint, probably Steph.
Yeah, I mean the way the game is played to now is more impacted by Steph. Yeah, definitely.
Steph to me has had just as much influence and style of play in the game of basketball as Michael Jordan did.
Well, yeah, maybe more.
Maybe I said maybe. I don't know. There was so many generations that patterned themselves off of, and I'll say the only reason I'm not going all in by saying Steph is more is that we haven't seen that direct replica of Steph yet, the way we did with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant.
I think it was supposed to be Trey,
but it wasn't. That's the point.
It wasn't. Yeah.
When you get somebody, and even Trey's influence is not as close to Steph as Kobe's was to Mike. Kobe was a direct replica.
It was supposed to be Harold Miner, though.
But there were so many other Mike, but there weren't. That's what I'm saying. There weren't.
Yeah.
And I love Trey. Trey Young is amazing to me. But you still look at Trey Young as Trey Young.
Yeah.
Kobe was the exact dissension of a singular individual. And to me, that tips the scale on influence when you see somebody who's directly impacted by somebody to that greatness, but that influence rises to that greatness. You know, we haven't seen that offshoot from Steph yet. It's very much like this. Like, if you're a tennis fan and you watch Carlos Alcaraz play, that directly is related to the influence of Rafael Nadal. Same countryman, same style of play, came right up under him, the same thing. Once we see that Carlos Alcaraz that's directly connected to Steph Curry, that's when I may be able to tip the scales. But we haven't seen the elevation in one player reach that level where Mike still has Kobe to lean on. So, my whole point in saying this, giving you this long ass answer, is that to me it's hard to say, all right, who's actually been more influential between those people that I talked about? How can you single one out, especially when you get into the minutia and you start layering where their comprehensive influence has been impactful?
I think
in society and culture, it's hard to single out one.
you gave me all this great information, but I think the answer is Michael Jordan now, just thinking about it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no argument there. Once again,
Because like even if you look at so many players, the way they ISO score, like Carmelo and so many other guys, like obviously there was an evolution of that through skill development, right? Where it got even crazier and crazier. But Mike was like the beginning of all that. And to your point, he got a lot of his stuff from Dr. J. You
yeah.
know? Yeah. So we all learned
Once
from the
again,
prior generation.
Yeah, and you
Mike,
know
once again,
what?
go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah, my
sorry.
bad. And you know what? Before you continue, and to add on to what you were probably getting ready to say, I was going to ask you, and as you kind of see, I was going to ask you your thoughts on how Michael Jordan and LeBron James impacted the engagement of basketball fans. Because there's a lot of engagement that these players impact, especially when comparing these two players' success
Yeah.
after championship wins.
I think Mike was very lucky social media didn't exist when he was doing his thing. You know, I think the following of Michael Jordan would have been different, as huge as he was. But as much as I think LeBron has benefited from that engagement because of social media and how large it is, I think that non-engagement worked to Michael's mystique.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think his affordability for who he presented himself as from a commercial standpoint worked for me as a vibe, but we never really got to know Michael's personal life or who he was personally, unless you really, really knew him. And I think that mystique worked well for Michael Jordan. So I think that worked in a fan engagement way, in a way that never happened with LeBron because of social media. But I think LeBron came into a space where, and this is why I give LeBron a lot of credit. Michael was never set up to fail. LeBron was.
Because of the hype.
I think for us, especially in the media, like elevating him to where we did when he was in high school, to doing things with him that we had never done to a high school basketball player at that time, to putting him on that platform, even going back to Slam Magazine, making him the youngest basketball diary. I think we did it his sophomore year, maybe. ESPN televises. They had never televised high school basketball games, predicated around one player. The McDonald's All-American game. McDonald's moving his game to his hometown. The $90 million contract Nike, all the stuff that came around LeBron, that I always believe that it's all you're affording this kid so much, because he's still a kid at the time, that the only way from here is down. Yeah. And for him to navigate that space the way that he has and not let it affect his game or who he wanted to become as a human being, it has been fascinating. And say what you want about LeBron and the love-hate that has been the total engagement of his career. For him to be on the positive side of that engagement for the most part is to me a testament of who he is as a player and as a human being, even with all the flaws that he has. And that's why I think, going down to the engagement question, is that, LeBron has had to deal a lot more with engagement, and the flaws that he has have become a part of that engagement. We've all been able to get to see a lot of his flaws and given us space to like nitpick at them and hold them against him in a way that Michael never had the responsibility of doing, because of the magnitude of social engagement now. and how it's become important to most individuals who are popular to create platforms for people to get to know them on a public basis.
Yeah,
Which is something that, Michael never, ever, ever had to deal with. Ever.
All right, Scoop. I got to run, but I got one more question for you.
Yeah, no problem.
Also, would love to have you on my show. We can make that happen too. But before we go, when I think of Slam magazine, I think of the covers, right?
Right.
Obviously. What's the greatest Slam magazine cover to you?
Well, for me, it's I think it was issue number 5, maybe, or either 5 or 6. It was the Michael Jordan cover. It was Mike's first cover for me is the best one. Matter of fact, I actually have it. I have a poster of it. It's the only Slam poster I own. It's the cover shot. Tony found the shot going through the NBA galleries with, I think, Carmen Romanelli. We were looking for a shot that we knew Mike was coming back. But it's just a facial shot of him yelling. I think he was sitting on the bench, but all you see is his face, and he's screaming, and it's the word Mike with the exclamation point written there, thick and yellow on the side. Because I love portraits. I think portraits stand, but nobody had ever seen that type of intensity in a still shot of Michael Jordan. And that was just, to me, that shot showed you everything Michael Jordan is about as a basketball player. And at that time, he was coming back, and his return, that photo still to this day moved me in a way that no other cover has. And the simplification of it.
Exactly.
It said all it needed to say. And then the exclamation point, like, really spoke to the image of the intensity and the screaming that was coming out of his face. Slam has never had a cover like that, and they've never done or found a cover like that. And the thing I think that makes it so special is that it wasn't something that was staged. It was a photograph that was found that the NBA did not use. And to me, that says everything. That right then at that time, and still is to this day, the definition of what Slam magazine is.
Right.
It's so anti-NBA that the NBA had gold in their possession. Like, nah, that's not an NBA photo. And we're like, that's it.
Yeah.
This photo speaks everything that this magazine stands on. And for you all not to use it, cool, shame on you, because we're gonna make this work. So to me, that's what I think is my favorite, and I think still to this, I don't want to say it's the greatest, because there's been others that's been more impactful, but it's my favorite cover, and I still think it's the best.
When we podcast, we have to say the greatest, Scoop. It's the greatest. No, I'm just messing with you.
I don't mean the greatest.
But thank you for coming on Combo. I mean, there's still some topics that we're probably not going to get to do with you on the show, but I was going to ask, like, because Combo came on my show one time and he had an all-time starting 5 of Walt Frazier, Allen Houston, Carmelo Anthony, Bernard King, and Patrick Ewing. And for you, as often as you follow basketball, what is your top 5? Was it going to be all-time Knicks starting lineup, Scoop?
I'll try to give it to you off my head, but I'm right now. I love anybody's top 5 Knick list ever, as long as you got Bernard King on there.
I got him.
As long as Bernard King is on that list, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm cool with it. Probably for me, my top 5, and this is gonna be. I don't have to do it by position. I can just do 5?
No, you can do your 5. Do your 5.
Do your 5.
Because my backcourt is hard. I don't want to do it. Earl and Walter easy, and even though Earl he wasn't Earl Monroe when he got there that he was before he got there. He wasn't the Baltimore Bullets Earl Monroe, because he had been too busy for years killing the Knicks and killing Walt Frazier, and that's the reason they went and got him. But Earl Monroe and Walt Frazier at the time, mythically, socially, culturally, greatest backcourt ever. So and Walt Frazier to me is, probably pound for pound, the greatest Knick ever. Patrick Ewing, Bernard King, and Jalen Brunson.
Nice. I'm glad you put Jalen Brunson on the list, and we're going to get into that. And sorry, Combo, you're not going to be able to stick around for the whole conversation. You know, you guys can talk about on
Thanks for having me, Rob. Great to meet you, Scoop.
Great to meet you too, Combo.
And would love to have you on my show. We'll make that happen. Appreciate all of you.
We'll make it happen, man. No problem. Appreciate the love, my man.
Yes, sir. Later.
Yeah. All right. Now we get to get the conversation between me and you at the NBA Finals coming on. And obviously, being around basketball culture as is during your career in journalism, you obviously know about the 1999 Knicks versus Spurs finals, and it's great to talk about it. Like, when you look back at the finals from that year, like, what has impressed you about it?
The fight that the Knicks put up from a Knicks standpoint, and me being a Knicks fan and a Knicks guy, I just wanted to see the fight. And they fought. And Ewing not really or at all being there hurt, and being a Ewing guy, hurt me because you wanted to see that. I wanted to see that at full strength. But just, the fight, man. The fight. I wanted to see a fight, and we saw a fight, and they did the best that they could under those circumstances. But you have to understand, I'm a Knicks fan my whole life. I really became a Knicks fan when I was in third grade. And that was in, I think, 1970. Yeah, like 1970, 71, before they won the first. I'm a Reds Holtzman guy. That whole team. I was a kid, man. And I'm in Chicago, but that was still my squad. So you got to understand, I got history with this team. But you also have to understand that I was a Tim Duncan fan and Ralph Childress too when they were at Wake Forest. So watching Tim Duncan has always been one of my favorite players. And I love David Robinson as a person. Was not a big fan of David Robinson as a player. Always been a fan of George Gervin. Always been a fan of San Antonio Spurs because they were one of the 4 teams that came over from the ABA. That whole San Antonio team with Larry Keenan and Johnny Moore, James Silas. From back in the 70s that lost to the Washington Bullets after being up 3-1. I loved everything about the Spurs. They were one of the teams that bought, along with the Denver Nuggets, that whole pacing, spacing, scoring type stuff. So not being a fan of David Robinson, and I'm still mad at he and Danny Manning for how they played in the U.S. game. I think they scored 2 points between them, so whatever. David just never did it for me. And also David had other interests outside of basketball that he never came into the game from my standpoint and made basketball a priority. It was always, basketball's great, I'm good at it, but it never seemed to be a priority. Like, he wasn't willing to die for the game. And I'm one of those guys that, look, man, you got to die for this game. And he never seemed like a guy. So I never really messed with David like that. So when Tim Duncan got there, man, I was like, you got to understand, like, watching he and Ralph Childress, especially Ralph Childress, I thought Ralph Childress was going to have the NBA career that Damian Lillard wound up having. Ralph Childress was a beast. And to watch he and Tim come in and then watch Tim, like his rookie year, Tim had one of the greatest rookie years you'll ever see in the history of basketball. So by the time they got there, as much as I'm pulling for the Knicks, I want to see Tim do what David Robinson was unable to do. Because I want to stop all this. David Robinson's one of the greatest center ever. I'm like, no, I'm an Akeem guy too. I'm like, no, Dream is the guy. Stop it. Patrick Ewing is the guy. Stop it. You know what I'm saying? Shaquille O'Neal's the guy. Stop it. David ain't in this conversation with these dudes. These are the dudes. Stop putting David Robinson in that conversation, right?
I mean, Dave Robinson did win 2 championships with San Antonio before he retired.
Yeah, but who got him those championships?
Tim Duncan.
Thank you. That's like telling me John Elway won 2 championships when we all know it was Terrell Davis in the backfield. He didn't get that till he got a running back who could really do it for him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I'm leaning into this. Like, as much as I'm a Knicks fan, I want to see Tim get his, because I was a fan of Tim Duncan, like way, like when he was at Wake Forest, young Tim Duncan. So I wanted to see him get that. I wanted him to be the one to finally change the David Robinson narrative and to get a title for, an ABA team. And once again, as I told you the whole story, Dr. J, I'm an ABA guy from way back in the day. So I wanted to see some type of validification for this league that had always been looked at as a stepchild to the NBA. I wanted to see them finally get their deservings.
Yeah, and they really got a lot of deservings. I mean, look at how Tim Duncan's career flourished ever since that win against the New York Knicks in 1999. I mean, He made San Antonio one of the biggest problems in the Western Conference for any team trying to win a championship. All the way up until the mid 2010, early mid 2010s when he won, when he still somehow regathered that championship winning pedigree that they've had in 1999 and 2000s.
Exactly.
It made San Antonio what they were, and obviously after he retired, there was still the playoff years with Kawhi Leonard, but the Spurs, they finally missed the playoffs in 2020, and now they're back. Victor Wembanyama brought San Antonio back to the playoffs that we all knew and loved.
Right.
Just one question: how impactful?
Wait. Let me throw one thing in there. You got to understand also that the point guard for that team, Avery Johnson. We go back from when we were in college together. He was at Southern University. Ooh. I was at Xavier University, and I actually played on a semi-pro team. I played 2 games on a semi-pro team in New Orleans because Avery Johnson was the point guard for that semi-pro team. It was called Gumbo. He went off to NBA camp, and one of the players on that squad played for our school. His name was Lewis Williams. He played on that semi-pro team, and they needed a point guard. And Lou asked me to come replace Avery Johnson for 2 games.
Ooh.
I used to play with Avery when he used to come to the gym in New Orleans and play at our school, Xavier University. I've known Avery forever. So as a Knicks fan, I'm there with my Knicks, but I got personal connection to that squad. So it's not just Tim Duncan there. I want my man Doogie, who we used to call him. I want Doogie to do his thing. I want Avery to get his. So you ask about that 99 time. I was conflicted, man. I was fucked up all over the place in that way.
Damn, I could only imagine, Scoop. I mean, man, I'll
make it deeper for you. Let's move this forward. When the Spurs started winning championships, not only, like I said, am I a Tim Duncan guy, but the guy who replaced Avery Johnson at point guard, Tony Parker, that's my cousin.
That's crazy. That's really crazy. Tony Parker is some clutch shots too. Even the 1 year where the Spurs did lose to the Miami Heat, let's not forget Tony Parker was tearing it up. He's literally unguardable.
Yeah. Yep.
Clearly, but
people forget. There's a nuance to Tony Parker's entire story. And that's when Greg Popovich, because Tony would not play great all of the time in the early stages. If you remember, Popovich went out and got Nick Van Exel.
Mm-hmm.
He got in. He only got Nick not to replace Tony, but to get in Tony's ass and let him know that he could be replaced. If Greg Popovich does not do that, Tony Parker doesn't become who Tony Parker became. He finally okay, let me get my shit together. Let me get my stuff together. Because Nick Van Exel is no joke. No joke at all. And by the time he got San Antonio, he could still, I can still give it to the best of him. Mm-hmm. He elevated Tony's game. Big time. It was a brilliant move by Popovich to do that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely brilliant. And as we thinking about this year's Knicks versus Spurs matchup, which championship win would be more impactful which would be more impactful? The Knicks defeat the Spurs, or the Spurs defeat the Knicks? I mean, obviously, you got the Knicks wearing the Knicks city cap. Obviously, we all want the New York Knicks to win, but how many games you think? And on top of that, how many games you think the series is going to go? Will it be a sweep for the Knicks like the last 2 rounds, or will it be a 7-game slugfest like what San Antonio had to deal with against OKC?
I think it's going to be closer to a slugfest. I have no idea how many games it's going to go. Being a Knicks fan, as long as I've been a Knicks fan, I could care less about the number. As long as they win the last game. You know, people would ask me, like, are the Knicks going to sweep this year? I'm like, I don't look. As long as it's the next series for the Knicks, I'm cool with it. I don't care how many games it takes. And I feel the same way about this. 4, 7, 3, 8. I don't care how many games, man. As long as it's the last game of the series, the Knicks come out on top, I'm cool. And I do really believe from a cultural standpoint, from a local standpoint, from a national standpoint, and I hate to say this because this is no disrespect to Victor, because I think he's becoming a global entity. But because this is the Knicks, and they are a global brand, and this is the game of basketball, and they've been much more of a global brand than Victor Wembanyama has been a globally recognized athlete, there's a global aspect to their impact of winning that's going to be greater than anything that's going to happen right now if the San Antonio Spurs win. So on those 4 levels, I think the Knicks winning is going to be more impactful. To not only the game of basketball, but also the culture of basketball.
And I ain't mad about that, because look at the type of players they have. I mean, especially Jalen Brunson. He literally developed from the 33rd overall pick in the draft years ago, coming to New York Knicks, changing what was at one point from 2000 to 1 or to 2024 or 2008. I believe it's 2022. Excuse me. The Knicks were barely winning anything. 1 playoff, 6 win, 8 playoff games in total. Jalen Brunson changed that franchise. As I told people, we think about the impact Jalen Brunson had on the New York Knicks these past 4 years.
Well, that's the thing. You got to understand, my connectivity to Jalen Brunson goes back to he's in high school. He played basketball here in Chicago. You know, so I've known him since he was in high school. I've known his dad when he played for the Bulls, but you know, I was the first person to ever do a national story on Jalen Brunson.
Mm-hmm.
When he was in McDonald's, he was the last Chicago guy to make the McDonald's All-American team. I did a story on him for ESPN. Nobody was paying attention to Jalen Brunson then. My point is that, to what you were saying, I never understood why he was drafted so low to begin with. You know, the cat won a state title here in Chicago, and he won one with at the time, 2 of the best high school players in the country were playing here. Jahlil Okafor and Jabari Parker. They were like 1 and 2 of the national players of the year. National players of the year. And he lost a state title to one of them and lost state title to the other one until he won his own. The kid's a winner. He gets to Villanova and wins 2 championships in 3 years. And his junior year, he's the player of the year in college basketball. Explain to me why that cat is drafted in the 2nd round. Explain that to me. So my affinity towards Jalen Brunson goes way back. And to see him get drafted, I was very pissed that he got drafted that low, because I'm like, all of you so-called experts, all of you so-called scouts, you know, y'all are crunching these analytical numbers looking for stuff. Why can't you all see that this cat wins, that he's a leader?
That's the same thing I said when he led the Mavericks to the conference finals in 2022. I was the one that said.
After doing what? After doing what? Being 6th man of the year. He was the 6th man of the year in the NBA, and the minute he got to start, what did he do? Say it again. What did he do?
He changed the culture of Knicks basketball.
No, he changed the culture of Mad basketball, got him to the finals, got him to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, he did.
Everybody, and look, I know Nico Harrison pretty well. I've known Nico for a long time. I'm not going to get into the whole, thing with Luka. What bothers me also about Jalen is how that did not become a narrative also. To me, it didn't even seem like they tried. But for the Mavericks to lose Jalen Brunson, to me, was just as big as them trading Luka. But nobody talks about that because of everything we just spoke of what this kid brought to the game and what he did for your franchise. His last 2 years there. As a point guard, you didn't even try to, you didn't even you know what? This kid may not be the end all be all, but he is a leader. And that's what we need is a leader. Because guess what? If you find a way to keep Jalen Brunson, and half of this goes on Mark Cuban too for not recognizing this. And I love Mark. Mark and I are we're cool, but I love Mark. But for you to not recognize this and let this kid technically walk, to me, it's just as big because if you keep Jalen Brunson, the Luka Doncic thing never happens. Because guess what? You're not looking at Luka to be the leader. Part of the reason that they got rid of Luka Doncic, like he's not the one that's going to lead us because he's not taking this thing seriously. But when you have a leader in place, all you're looking for Luka to do now, man, just hoop. Just hoop. Everybody's going to follow Jalen's lead. We're going to follow your numbers. That's fine. We can deal with that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I know what you're saying.
That's what they needed, but I don't understand how Dallas allowed that to happen. But secondly, it still bothers me to this day that that's not a point of conversation. Nobody's having a big conversation about that, especially after watching what Jalen Brunson has been able to do once he got into that Knicks uniform.
Mm-hmm. Carrying like some 3 years of not only getting out the first round, but defeating some elite teams, elite players. Julius Randle. Let's see. So many elite players. James Harden.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell twice.
Yeah.
Joel Embiid. That's what I meant to say, not Julius Randle.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a lot. A lot to soak in these past 4 years. Jalen Brunson carried the Knicks to the finals.
Yeah.
Even if he does, do you still consider this the most successful Knicks season, regardless of whether or not they win a championship?
Wow, that's a good question. Ooh-wee, that is a good question. Man, that's a good question.
I mean, it's something to think about.
Man, that is a. I'm trying to think back on all the history. Ooh. Ooh-wee. Help my memory a little bit. When did Patrick Ewing get? It was in the Eastern Conference Finals that Patrick Ewing got hurt in '99, right?
Yeah, it was in the conference finals. Yeah, that was before.
How many games did he play in that series?
I mean, he played like
the last 2 games, I think.
Yeah, it was the last 2 games. He got. I know it was a game at the Garden. I know for sure.
So he didn't play the last 2 games, and they still got to the finals in the last 2 games without playing. And that was when nobody expected. I remember because we put Latrell Sprewell on the cover of the magazine, and got a lot of trouble to that because Latrell Sprewell saves the NBA. I remember that was some controversial shit back then. But Patrick being injured, still getting to that finals without him, even though he played in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that run may be more improbable than this one.
Yeah, because they're the first AC to do it.
Yeah.
You can't get past that.
I can't crown this team that one yet. I still give it to that 99 team.
Yeah, I would. At least for the time being until the Knicks actually get the job done.
Yeah. Well, you know what? They got there. And it's hard to expect, especially once we saw what San Antonio was able to build with that culture, with the center being Tim Duncan of that culture. It's hard to say that that New York team, especially without Patrick Ewing, had a chance of beating that team. You know what I'm saying? Let's see what winds up happening, because they're dealing with a team that is extremely, extremely young, that they also beat in a meaningful Cup series earlier this year. And it also came into this season without any conversation or ongoing conversation about being in the place that they're in now.
Mm-hmm.
From the day the Knicks let go of Thibodeau last year, the conversations about them being in the finals started. That was the starting point for this whole season for them. So it was almost like, and you watched more Knicks games this year than I did. It almost looked like they were sleepwalking through things because their minds were on this, getting to this point right now. You can't say that for the San Antonio Spurs, because they didn't come into the season having this being their everyday all day. This was everyday all day for the Knicks to get here. So I think at some point, that everyday all day, this being your mission, this being your goal, may tip the scales a little bit towards the Knicks' favor, because this is normal for them. This is expected for them. This is what they believed from day one they were supposed to be here. And I think in a series where the teams are this can be this closely analyzed, those small things become big things. And I think that may play a big role. That can shift the course in the game. And that little belief that we're supposed to win this game 6, as opposed to San Antonio, like, damn, I don't know if we're supposed to win a game in the Garden on the road. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Those small things can shift things. So I think that's going to play a big role.
Yeah, it's definitely going to play a big role. I mean, this is like literally one of the biggest matchups. So you know what? While we're on the subject, as long as you've been covering basketball, what is your all-time top 3 NBA Finals that you watched or covered?
Definitely the Bulls Jazz series. The flu game series. I was at the flu game. I was like right off the bitch, sitting, like, I saw the whole thing from the Bulls side of the thing. That's still one of my greatest sports moments ever, because people can say all they want to. Mike was sick. Like, you can't fake that. That's not a, Kurt Schilling type fake whatever. No, that's not fake blood in your sock type. Dude was sick. Like if black could turn green, that's, like vomiting, all that, like, that was like sick. I don't know. It doesn't matter what it was. He was not 100. And for him to gut that game out the way that he did, and for them to get that series out knowing everything was on the line, the way it was on the line, that might be number one. Just from being there and watching that unfold. I would say, you asked cover or actually seen, right?
Covered.
Covered? The Dallas series, when they played Miami the first time.
That was
Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade series. So hold on. I don't know why the phone just tapping in. But I'll say that because Dallas went up in that series 2-0. And some of the Dallas Mavericks team were kind of talking shit during the post press conferences. And Dwayne Wade came into that series with the flu. It kind of, I think it was maybe talked about, not really talked about. They never made a big storyline of it. He was, battling temperatures of like, I think 101 in the 100 area. He had the flu. He was sick. He wasn't 100%, but he was not going to, not play. And at some point during game 2, his fever literally broke. You'd have to ask him about exactly when it happened. But he knew he was, all right, I'm good. You know how it is when you're sick and all of a sudden you can feel your temperature inside your body get back to normal, where you could swallow and you don't feel that pain in your throat anymore, where you're not like, I need, it just almost like that break of reality and normalness hits you, and you know you're not 100%, but you know you've crossed that, you're around that corner, you got on the other side of the mountain. I forgot who was on the podium, but like I said, some of the Dallas Maverick players were talking junk. They felt real confident, like overconfident. And I remember standing outside of the press room, and Dwayne Wade walking up to me and putting his arm around me and said, they don't know I'm good now. He said, they don't know. He said, watch what he literally said, watch what I'm about to do to these motherfuckers. I'm good now. I'm back. This shit is good now.
And look what he did. I mean, he carried even that game-winning shot, those the game-winning shot, I believe it was in game 3 or 4, those go-ahead free throws in game 5, and then obviously wrap it up in game 6. Come on, man.
Dude, I'm telling you, right, they have been, I watched Julius Erving put on a performance. I think it was in the ABA 76 Finals against the Denver Nuggets, where I think he averaged over 40 points a game in that series. I watched Bernard King, what he did to the Detroit Pistons in 1984. I think he damn near averaged 42 in that, I think, 6-game series. And then there's Dwayne Wade. In the final 4 games, to me, it's up there with one of the greatest final performances, or playoff performances of one individual in a series. And to sit there and watch that unfold, that's number 2. And I'm doing it in descending order, so that the Utah Bulls series, number 3, that series with Dwayne Wade against Miami in the last 4 games, watching that and covering that is number 2. But the number 1 was the San Antonio Spurs coming back after losing to the Miami Heat. The year of the Ray Allen shot. The next year, I think it was 2014.
It was 2014. The team, I mean, they split the first 2 games in San Antonio, but then by the time they get to Miami, the San Antonio Spurs just straight decimated them the rest of the way.
They swept them, didn't they? They beat them in 5.
They beat them in 5 games.
Yeah, 5 games.
I watched the NBA Finals. I mean, man, Kawhi Leonard literally carried that team on his back in those 2 games in Miami. So, like, yeah, no Miami miracle this time. And then you get to San Antonio, you were down 15 early. You were down by like 16 early, and then San Antonio just switched it up.
I have never seen a team like they came. Greg Popovich said that wasn't the case. They came back on a mission. They came back up. That whole season was revenge to get Miami back. And once they got them in the finals, man, I have never seen a team play at that level of basketball in my life. I'm serious, man. I would take that team in that series and put it up against any team in any finals and put my money on them just for a series. To me, that's the best basketball I have seen a team play in a series in my life. And that's including the Golden State teams with KD. That's including those Bulls teams. That's including some of those Lakers teams, the Bird Celtics teams. You know what I'm saying? Even the Lakers teams that had Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, and Elgin Baylor that was hurt. That San Antonio team, because they were on that mission. Go back and look at that series and watch how flawless and how determined and how angry and how just purposeful they played. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Like, I have never seen basketball played at that level by one team before in my life. And just being able to see because that's basketball to me. That was basketball at the highest elevation I'd ever seen it play. That team in that series, yeah.
Yeah, and funny enough, we're bringing that up, talking about that San Antonio win in 2014. That was the last time the Spurs were in the finals. Many years later, it's Victor Wembanyama's turn to try to add on to what's already established championship legacy. And, well, yeah. anything can happen. It's just going to show anything can happen in basketball. You've been around basketball culture to know that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I don't think this finals is going to get as tactical as many want it to be. I think at some point during the games, it'll just be an element of two teams just literally out there hooping, like hooping with a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Damn the strategy, damn the play calling, like, yo, we're just going to go at it. And I think a lot of the defense is going to dictate that, where coaches, not just head coaches, but coaches on the sidelines, assistant coaches and associate coaches are going to be looking at the game and drawing up counter attacks and counter plays to adjust to what defenses are being played. I think they will get to a point in several of these games in spurts. And it could come late in the third quarter, depending on what the leads of the game. And it could come down to like the middle of the fourth quarters going on to the back end of the fourth quarters, depending on the games, where the players are going to be like, damn all that, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the defenses, because of the way the teams both systematically play defense, but the way individuals on each team play defense, it's going to be that whole win your matchup mentality for every matchup that comes across half court on every single play. And we're just going to see basketball being played at a hoop level, man. At a hoop, like not knowing an audience is around, not realizing or giving a damn about cameras or coaches being around. It's just us on this 94-50. Us on this dance floor, seriously, let's go.
Yeah, just two teams going at it.
Well, I think we're going to see that in this series, and that's going to be a beautiful thing to watch. But inside of that, and this is my long answer to your Wimby question, inside of that, it's going to be interesting to see how he plays in those scenarios. I know he's played a lot of basketball, and I know he's played a lot of global basketball. But to your point, this is going to be Rucker Park just hooping. Mm-hmm. This is going to be West 4th Street just hooping.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. This is going to be, just Gaucho, soul in the hole, hooping. How is he going to deal with just that in those moments where everything you've been taught about basketball is thrown out the window? Yo, man, we just hooping. Let's go. Let's see what you're really about. It's going to be interesting to see how he deals with those moments when they hit him at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, well, this is going to be one of the greats. Well, I'm glad you managed to drop that. And to wrap up the show, obviously I know you probably answered this question that I'm about to ask anyway, when you talked about do for yourself or die slave. But what advice do you have for anybody looking to start a journalistic career?
That the answer to that is embedded in that phrase, in that saying. But I think I'll give you this answer, and hopefully this answer is the answer. We're at a point right now where you can enter into the journalism space or enter into the media space without the threat of losing anything. There's no sweat equity put on the table for you to have to pour yourself into in order to find a place or find space in this industry. My advice is to anybody trying to that wants to get into the put something in front of you or put something inside of you worth losing to get into this game. like, because it's so easy and you don't really have to put any money into developing your own website, it's easy for you to do that and say, oh, if it doesn't work, it's cool, I can go on to something else. Back in the day, you weren't able to do that because you had to have some type of foundation to be able to build something off the ground. We didn't have access to free cameras with phones to be able to post video for free. To do that, in order to like get yourself to be seen, you had to either buy a still camera or buy a literal video camera in order to, and then you had to spend money to get yourself seen. That's that lose $1 million to make $1 million mentality, where you put all of yourself in there because you were putting your financial investment in this to make it work. When you don't have some type of sweat equity to put in there, you make what you're doing disposable. My advice was, don't come in the game with disposable material. Come into the game with something worth losing. So put something into this. Whatever it is, even if it's like TikTok material, even if it's a podcast, even if it's a blog, even if it's a YouTube channel, even if it's you trying to get into a legacy organization, even if it is you building your LinkedIn page, even if it is you putting a visual or video reel, to whatever it is, make it to the point that it's worth you losing. You know, make it to the point that I spent days and hours, I lost not getting money doing this to get this right.
Mm-hmm.
To see what I can look like or feel like, or what I can get out of myself as being the best for this project, to get this up and running, to introduce myself to the industry. My advice to them is, whatever it is you do, make it worth you losing it in order to do it. Not something that you could be like, if this ain't shit, I could just make another one. No. See what you're about. Find out about yourself in the process of trying to introduce yourself to the world.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my advice. Like, act like you're putting money into this. Act like if you have $1,000 in your bank account. Seriously, if you got $1,000 in your bank account and your rent is $800. Understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Your rent is $800. You got $1,000 in the bank account, but I got to spend $800 in order to get this video done, to get this podcast off the ground. What do you risk losing now? You risk losing your rent in order to get this done. Act like that's the reality. Act like putting that type of investment in yourself is the smart decision, risking where the hell you're going to live for the next month. That would be my advice, because that changes the way you approach the game. That it changes the way you approach your craft. That changes the way you're going to look at yourself moving forward, because it's going to force you to tap into yourself in a way that you would never do if what you're putting out there you feel is disposable.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my advice.
I really love that. Pretty love that advice, because we got so many different media professionals in New York City doing everything they're doing right now, invest themselves, buying the equipment to do the drills and telling their stories about many different basketball players that we don't even know about before they get publicized on ESPN. It's a lot.
Yeah, but also, don't just tell the stories about people we don't know about. What's the angle of the story? What makes the story special? My wife has a great saying. She said, everybody doesn't need a documentary. Even some of the most famous people, but just because you're famous doesn't mean your story's interesting.
Interesting.
In this rush to try to find who's next, don't just find people whose you feel are going to be the next. It said, whose story is interesting? What's the angle of the story you're trying to tell? If all you're telling is the story of that person's name or what that person's ability are, does not mean you're selecting the best story or the best angle for that story. You get what I'm saying? Where's the depth? And that also has to be considered. But with everybody in a rush to try to get things out there, there's no true in-depth storytelling being told. Because it's all about who's next. Not about who has the most depth. It's about who has the most feature, or who has, instead of like whose story is going to capture the audience the most. Whose story is the most compelling. Or what angle can I take on telling this story that's going to make it the most interesting?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So all of that goes into everything that we're saying right now. So it's there's things and approaches and all type of things that we could give as advice, but on the topical level, just do something that's worth losing. But once you decide to do it, the second layer to what I give them is when you start telling stories, start looking at the angles. Just don't look at the story itself. Look at the angles of how you want to tell stories. Tell stories. Find the angles that nobody else is telling, and make your stories unique.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you for the advice. And that wraps this episode, Nothing But That Sports. So thank you so much, Scoop Jackson, for stopping by. I love what you do, and continue your work. And I see you working for Chicago Sun-Times now, publishing stories there as well. So at least the career is flourishing.
Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm trying to stay above sea level, man. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And just remember, do it for yourself or die a slave.
Yes, sir.
For Robert Scoop Jackson, Rafiq Louisar, we'll see you next time.